They told Eli Carter she was a savage, and the word followed him like dust as he rode toward the fort at dawn, clinging to his coat, settling in his thoughts, shaping his expectations before he ever laid eyes on her. And as a man who had lived most of his 36 years surviving on other people's definitions, poor farmer, failed soldier, hired gun with nothing left to lose, he accepted the job the way he accepted most things, quietly, without questions, because the pay was enough to keep his mother fed through winter and because the officer who hired him spoke with the kind of certainty that discouraged doubt, explaining that an Apache woman of importance had been captured during a border skirmish, that she was dangerous, clever, capable of escape, and that Eli's task was simple: guard her day and night in the small stone outpost beyond the river until transport arrived. No conversation, no mercy, no mistakes. Yet the moment he opened the heavy iron door and saw her sitting there, wrists bound but spine straight, bruised but unbroken, dark eyes lifted not in fear, but in weary defiance, something inside him faltered, because she did not look like a monster or a prize of war or the caricature whispered in taverns. She looked human, achingly so, with dust in her hair, dried blood at her temple, and a quiet dignity that made Eli suddenly aware of his own breathing, his own heartbeat, his own complicity, and he told himself it was nothing, just a trick of the light or the loneliness that came from too many nights alone. But as the hours passed and he brought her water, then bread, then a blanket when the night grew cold, he noticed how she thanked him with a nod rather than words, how she moved carefully as though guarding pain deeper than wounds, how she watched the small window as if measuring time by the angle of the sun, and slowly the stories he'd been paid to believe began to unravel, because savages did not hum softly to themselves in the dark. Savages did not flinch at the sound of children laughing beyond the walls. Savages did not close their eyes and whisper names when they thought no one was listening. On the second night, when rain drummed against the stone and the fort grew quiet, she finally spoke, her voice low and steady, telling him her name was Nayland, that she was a healer, that she had been taken while trying to reach a village stricken with fever. And as Eli listened, really listened, he felt something crack open inside him, a realization that kindness had been stripped from her not because she lacked it, but because others feared it. And when she asked him why he guarded her, he surprised himself by telling the truth, that he needed the money, that he had once believed in orders and flags but had buried too many friends to believe any more. And she smiled then, not with joy but with understanding, and said softly that captivity teaches people to see clearly. And those words haunted him, followed him through the long hours as memories rose unbidden, of his father teaching him to mend fences instead of break them, of his mother saying that a good man is measured not by what he's paid to do, but by what he chooses when no one is watching. And the next morning brought an unexpected turn when the commanding officer returned, angry and impatient, announcing that transport would be delayed and that Nayland would be questioned again, harsher this time, because information was needed. And Eli felt a chill as he watched two soldiers drag her toward the yard, her feet stumbling, her chin still lifted. And in that moment the line between duty and conscience sharpened painfully because he knew what questioning meant, had seen it before. And when he tried to object, his voice came out thin, easily dismissed. Yet as the interrogation began and Nayland cried out, not in fear but in pain that no human should endure, Eli felt his hesitation burn away, replaced by a fierce, unexpected clarity, a realization that obedience without humanity was just another form of cruelty. And when the officer ordered him to hold her still, Eli dropped his weapon instead, the sound echoing like a gunshot, and for a breathless second the world seemed to pause, every eye on him, every consequence waiting. And he did the only thing that felt true. He stepped between Nayland and her tormentors, saying quietly but firmly that he would not be paid to break what was already wounded, that no amount of coin could buy his silence or his soul, and when the officer threatened him with prison or worse, Eli met his gaze and felt no fear, only relief because the choice had been made, and chaos followed as he seized the moment, unlocking the chains while soldiers shouted and rain began again as if the sky itself had chosen sides. And together they ran, past the yard, through the brush, into the waiting trees where the land opened like a promise. And though pursuit came swiftly, Eli guided her through ravines and hidden paths he knew from boyhood, his lungs burning, his heart pounding with something dangerously close to hope, until at last they reached the river and crossed under moonlight, water tugging at their legs, washing blood and labels away, and on the far bank, breathless and trembling, Nayland turned to him and pressed her forehead to his, a gesture of gratitude so profound it left him speechless, and she told him he had not only set her free, but reminded her that compassion still lived in the world beyond her people, that one man's courage could ripple outward like water, touching lives unseen, and when they parted, because their paths could not remain the same, Eli watched her disappear into the hills, carrying with her not just freedom but a story that would be told around fires for generations, a guard who chose mercy over money, and he returned alone, ready to face whatever punishment awaited, yet fate had one last turn to offer, because weeks later, after his dismissal and disgrace, as winter closed in and his mother's health faltered, riders appeared at his homestead bearing supplies, medicine, and a message spoken with quiet reverence. The healer lived, the villages healed, and kindness had been repaid, not with gold, but with life. And as Eli stood in the doorway holding warmth he had not earned, but had been given, he understood at last that freedom is not only the absence of chains but the presence of choice, that humanity survives in the smallest acts of courage, and that when one person dares to see another, not as a label or an enemy, but as a fellow soul, the world, even in its harshest corners, bends gently toward hope.